and press, if they're here. If warm in the chamber, please feel free to remove jackets if you wish with that. And I'd like to introduce our staff team. Today is for the planning committee, we've got Sarah Wilkinson, Stuart Van Kulenberg, Oliver Bolter. On the legal team, we've got Ben Gard and Marie Bartlett, our committee clerk. I have apologies from Paul Fuller, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Housing. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest, safest escape route, which is over there. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park around the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used. I think they're out of order anyway in the event of emergency. And please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member or staff. I do request mobile phones are switched off or to mute. I request that all speakers use the microphones in front of you. I think everyone's got one. I request that no food is consumed during the meeting unless it is for a medical need. And I do remind members that they cannot leave the council chamber during the presentation or debate to an application. If they leave, they'll be unable to vote on that application. Remind members of the public that they are present purely to observe the process. And I'll just, for yourself, I think you've been here before, so you know the lighting system. When you're asked to speak, the green light will display. Yep. And when you have 30 seconds left, the amber light will display. And when the red light displays, I will stop you talking. This is to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time, and that process is seen to be fair. You've got the details of how many minutes you've got in front of you. We do have Councillor Joe Lever has sent his apologies because he's not well, and he has sent his speech, which will be read out by Ollie Bolter at that particular time. And I particularly wish to welcome a new member to the committee, which is Councillor Shirley Smart, who is now here on behalf of IWalk. I'm sure everybody will make you welcome, Shirley, back in old times in this building within that. Just to remind you, Shirley, that Shirley can take part in the debate. She did come in at the site visit on Friday, but unable to vote. But you can put your views forward. We'll start the move to the agenda. Immediately go to the previous minutes to confirm as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of August 21, which are tabled before you. Do I have a proposal for that? Do I have anyone who has particular things they wish to raise about the minutes? Councillor Jarman, would you like to?
Yes, Chair. I'll limit my contribution to the part of the meeting that I attended. I did go through the minutes fairly carefully, and there were a number of errors on the minutes, specifically to recording the points of order that were raised and the motions that were raised. There were also a number of those things which are out of sequence in the minutes. So I've taken the liberty of correctly going through the tape remarkably carefully. and making sure that the points of order and the motions are correctly recorded, as are the sequence, which has been corrected in it as well. The minutes actually missed out 3 of the points of order, which I've added in the correct sequence. So I propose that we accept this corrections to the minutes as a motion before we vote on the substantive component, which is the minutes themselves.
Are you putting this as an amendment to the minutes?
Correct.
Do you have a seconder for that?
Sorry.
Councillor Adams. Okay.
It might be a good point to just
I have actually read it just before the meeting, but I know some of you who come. Have all members had time to read this in front of them, this amendment?
It was sent into Democratic Services in advance of the meeting. I don't know why it wasn't distributed earlier, but I'm happy that it was distributed for this meeting now.
I think everybody's got a copy of them in front of them. Do members wish to have some time to read them? Okay, can we just have a few minutes for members to read them? Thank you. Let's give another minute for members. I can see some of them are still reading. Okay, everybody's has read them. I'm just going to refer to Ben to give some guidance to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, good afternoon. You'll remember me last time at the last meeting having a brief thing to say on the minutes, and it's just an opportunity now for me to remind you that the minutes that are before you, the question that's before you is simply the accuracy of the minutes having occurred last time. And I'll just take a brief moment to just reiterate that the primary purpose of minutes is to record the decision made and are not intended to be a verbatim record of what each councillor has said during the debate. Ultimately, the accuracy of the minutes are a matter for this committee. Before you, there is a proposal on the table from Councillor Jarman, which has been seconded by Councillor Adams. And unless I can be of any further assistance at this stage, Chair, I can rest.
Thank you. Just for the record, I was not in this part of the meeting last time, so I have no comment regarding that particular sign.
think you need to correct what you've just said, Chair. You were here for part of the meeting that is minuted in the minutes that were published on the website about 2 weeks ago. If we go to the agenda papers, pages 3 and 4, the minutes of everything on page 3 and down to where it says the Vice Chairman took the chair on page 4, I understood were your responsibility to check the accuracy prior to publication as you were in the chair. From where it says the Vice Chairman took the chair, I was responsible because I chaired that meeting and I corrected the draft that was provided, not much, but a few things I felt needed to be reflected. So I do think you need to correct that. You bear partial responsibility for the published draft minutes with myself. They're not exclusively mine. So I hope you correct that.
I correct that.
Thank you very much. Can I also say that it's quite clear to me that a bit of work needs to be done with some of the newer members of this council with regard to what minutes are. Minutes are not a verbatim account of committee meetings. Mr. Gard has already said that. Those of us who've been councillors for a while learn that over a period of time. I remember when I was first elected, I wanted all of my wonderful speeches recorded at full council, but it's not allowed. I wanted everything that I ever said recorded, but it's not allowed. I'm being sarcastic, of course, that they were wonderful. They were generally disliked very much by whoever was running the council. Minutes are there to record the decision making. I believe that the section that I'm responsible for in the draft minutes are entirely accurate. I also, to be fair, think the bit you're responsible for was entirely accurate. To receive a verbatim account, a partisan verbatim account of the last meeting, literally quarter of an hour before the start of this meeting, is unacceptable in any democratic organisation. They should have been provided in advance, just as the draft minutes have been available on the website for at least a fortnight to my knowledge. Therefore, Chair, I hope that the members of this committee will reject the proposal by Councillor Jarman, seconded by Councillor Adams. I also hope they will both talk to some more experienced members of the Alliance Group about the purpose of minutes at committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. Councillor Jarman.
Yes, just to note that the only bits which are verbatim in here are the points of order and the motions. The rest of it remains a summary of the meeting and is not verbatim. So these verbatim bits are primarily those which are points of order and motions. And I do believe that points of order and motions should be correctly recorded. If we don't correctly record those items and then we record that it was agreed, there will always be a margin of a doubt about what was agreed at the end of the day. So I think it is important that those elements are brought forward with accuracy. The rest of it, as I said, is a summary, as intended for minutes generally. Thank you.
Thank you. I tend to take this to the vote for the amendment, which has been put forward by Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's quite unusual that we're again discussing minutes. I think we've been approving minutes on much more complicated meetings than what we've had previously, to be quite honest. I think probably Councillor Jarman's amendment is correct, but I think the existing minutes are correct as well. It's just that Councillor Jarman's puts much more meat on the bone. I personally am happy to support the amendment, just because if Councillor Jarman and his seconder want to put more detail in, I don't see an issue with that. But the only thing I would say is that I wouldn't want to be supporting this regularly going forward. I think we either need to get some more detail in the minutes, but we don't have that on other committees. I think I wouldn't like us to be doing this all the time, but this extra detail that's in here, I'm happy to support that. It's certainly, the minutes we had originally are not wrong. The minutes we've got add more detail. I think it's simple as that.
Councillor Brady.
Councillor Brady.
My turn.
Thank you, Chair. I've just read Councillor Jarman's amendments, and yes, whilst don't disagree with anything that's said in his amendment, it goes down to what is minutes, and minutes is not a he said, I said, you said type record. The minutes that have been received with the papers are correct. If there's an order that's wrong in those minutes, that's fine, that can be corrected. But I think we're setting a dangerous precedent if we put in the minutes and agree an amendment, which puts all the nitty gritty of the conversation. As long as it's recorded accurately as to how the meeting went, I think that is the correct. So I will not be supporting the amendment because that is not what minutes of a meeting actually are.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. At the end of the day, the meeting was recorded and is 100% record of what took place. The minutes record it in a summarised fashion. And I agree with Councillor Braden. I think the minutes, as we had them, should be approved.
Well, we'll go to a vote if there's no other member who wishes to speak. So,
You made a very good point there, Councillor Oliver, about the meeting being recorded. And there's issues of public perception here. And I'm getting countless emails about these minutes not being a true record. I agree, it's a learning curve for me. I agree they're a summary. But in this case, I believe we need that little bit of extra detail on the bone, just to make it more reflective of what actually happened in the meeting.
okay, I'm now going to actually go straight to the vote. Yeah, it's for the amendment, okay, as proposed by Councillor Jarman and seconded by Councillor Adams. Those for the amendment, can you show your hands?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sorry, I'm abstaining.
6, 4, and 5.
The amendment is carried. We'll now have a vote on the substantive motion of the minutes as amended. So those for the minutes with the amendment, a show of hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
Any abstentions?
1.
1 abstentions. So any declarations of interest? No? Yes, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the neighbouring councillor. My ward is neighbouring the application we've got on the table tonight.
We move on to public questions. I haven't received any written public questions. Is there any questions up there in the gallery? No. We therefore move on to item 4, the report of the Strategic Manager of Planning and Infrastructure. We have one, sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like some clarification, so point of order. Prior to us dealing with this application, I'd like clarification about the status of site visits. As you're aware, there's been a great deal of correspondence by email, etc., regarding the whole issue of site visits, and I would like to place on record some of that and secure an explanation from you as chair of this committee as to precisely what is going on with site visits on this planning committee. It is within the constitution and the regular practice that everybody on this committee attends a site visit prior to an application being considered, or they can't take part. That has always been the case, and Councillor Price knows precisely what the consequences of that with an application back in July, but it's also affected other people in the past. Councillor Quirk is sat over there, unable to sit today because he's never attended a site visit at Castle Lodge. However, at the beginning of last week, our monitoring officer advised a member of this committee, I'm not going to say who it was, that they did not need to attend the site visit for this application last Friday, as he had attended a previous site visit in June. The fact that we'd had a previous site visit 3 months ago is irrelevant as far as our constitution is concerned. This advice, in my view, was very clearly contrary to the constitution of this council. This monitoring officer has today advised, astonishingly, that site visits are unnecessary anyway. Unnecessary. Provided you can convince the monitoring officer or the strategic manager that you know enough about the site. This is apparently a new ruling, and it's based on legal advice, apparently, rather than the constitution. You, as chair, Councillor Lilly, despite initially taking a constitutional view regarding the need to attend the meeting, then changed your mind and have allowed that member to participate today. Can you explain to me and to anybody else why you are allowing this breach of our constitution, putting at risk whatever decision we take, whether approved or refused? Do you not think our constitution should be the guidance by which councillors operate as a committee, rather than cavalier advice by our monitoring officer? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie, for raising this, and it has preoccupied us and the committee this week, and I'm happy to respond. I do agree with you entirely that within our constitution we do have the fact of actually visiting a site visit. And the tradition or the protocol has been that we do that together on an agreed time. A situation occurred when councillor, in this case Councillor Brading, had through, I think, Councillor Hastings, right, put forward a question to the monitoring officer in regard to the fact that he'd attended the previous meeting in June, and whether he, because he couldn't attend the Friday meeting, the site visit, could he be excused because of the previous one? And yes, the monitoring officer did respond. I have to say, and I'll come to this, without consultation with myself, did actually say that that was the case. So Councillor Brading went away at the weekend with the knowledge or given that particular answer. I did come in at that particular point and refer to all of you in correspondence that it was important to attend the Friday meeting. And I thank you, and I thank Councillor Shirley Smart to also attend that meeting on Friday at the site. Subsequent, there was a meeting, a chair's brief meeting afterwards, and this issue was raised, and the monitoring officer was very clear that Councillor Brading did have a right to attend. We discussed that, and it was viewed that he at least needed to be updated, and it was put forward that the strategic planning officer would go with Councillor Brading, in fact, this morning to the site. Sorry? This afternoon, before this meeting, to be able to have an update of the site and be briefed by the planning officer. We have, or the officers have taken, the staff team have taken a external legal view, and that external legal view says that we are in order, that all members have had a site visit, and therefore we can proceed with this meeting. It was suggested that we have another site visit with all of us at 4 o'clock today. I felt that this was impractical and unfair, and felt that the external advice came forward we could. Now, actually, my view on this was I don't think this should have happened. And I've made it very, very clear to the Chief Executive and to the staff team that this cannot happen. And there is, very rightly, as raised by Councillor Brodie, some conflict between our constitution and the legal advice as presented by the monitoring officer. I felt it was important to go ahead with this meeting, that we had met legal requirements in that regard, but this should not ever happen again. And that one, and I've made it very clear in writing to the Chief Executive, that one, there should have been consultation, as in the Constitution, with I as chair, that anything regarding this committee should come through me as chair, and it should be myself that then goes to the monitoring officer and the relevant officers. Two, that we do need to sort this out, and my view is that the monitoring officer, with the chair of the council, which is Councillor Brodie, and the strategic manager of planning, looks at the constitution, and actually if there needs to be any recommendations or changes to prevent this kind of thing happening again, that those are put forward to the full council for voting on within that. It is not a situation within that, but the legal advice, and at the end of the day, as chair, I have to take that legal advice, was that Councillor Brodie, because he had been informed by the monitoring officer of that, it would be unfair to exclude him on condition that he actually did go to the site. So we have actually met. It is not an acceptable situation. I agree with you. And it was a difficult one, but that is my ruling as I have put forward in writing to all of you. I am keen to that we move on. Councillor Brady. Sorry, Councillor Brogue.
Chair, well, thanks for your explanation, but it still doesn't really address my concerns. Can I just say that I very specifically didn't mention Councillor Brady, and you managed to mention him 4 times, I think, which 5 times, which is interesting that you couldn't keep that name out of a public forum. That wasn't my purpose at all. My purpose is I am the chair of the council. I see it as my role to be the guardian of the Constitution. I'm not a lawyer, but I have a pretty good knowledge of the Constitution. And I believe that we have been advised as a result of this farrago that the constitution of this council is now irrelevant in terms of how it sits against legal advice from the monitoring officer. That not only makes it difficult at this committee as to how we operate, but how everything operates. I have to chair full council in accordance with the constitution. Am I allowed now, just to get different advice from the monitoring officer? Is this the way this council is now going to behave? And in terms of the planning matter before us today, whatever happens with this application, a highly contentious application, whether it's approved or refused, I believe it leaves us vulnerable to appeal, review, whatever, because we're breaching our own procedure. You yourself, Chair, are party to action, I understand, against this council about alleged breach of procedure at a previous planning committee. And yet you seem to be permitting this happening at this planning committee. I'd like you to place on the record, I'm prepared to go ahead with this, my dissatisfaction with that, and I disassociate myself with your decision entirely as the chair of this council. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. Can we move on to the application? Can I give to Stuart to present?
Thank you, Chairman. Just bring the presentation up for the public.
Just for members' reference, we're looking at 21-01450-RVS, Castle Lodge, 54 Castle Road, Newport. This application is a variation of condition 4 and removal of condition 6 on the 21-00076 full to allow permanent change for use to HMO and to agree the submitted management plan for the use of the property. Stuart, can you present?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors. The planning application relates to a property called Castle Lodge, located on Castle Road, where the cursor is. Members, councillors recall that the application is situated towards the junction White Pit Lane, and to the north is Carisbrooke Road and Carisbrooke High Street through here. Members will see from the plan that generates a residential street scene. There are residential properties and gardens that back onto the host property, and residential properties opposite and to both sides.
Thank you, Vanessa. Okay. Can everyone see better now? Sorry.
Okay. So for councillors that may have missed that due to the sunlight issue, then again, Carisbrooke Road is located up here, Carisbrooke High Street through here, the junction White Pit Lane and Castle Hill through here, and the property is located here. terms of the general site setup, there is a frontage here that's open at the moment that members would have seen on their site visit. That generally provides parking. The main element of the property here through here is 2-storey, and there's a single-storey extension along the north eastern boundary, which again provides additional accommodation. There's a small courtyard, and members will be aware of the small outbuilding that was also there. The application relates back to an application the committee considered in June, which granted planning permission for use of the property as a HMO, with the intention the applicant association with council would provide stage 2 homeless accommodation. Again, this the approved ground floor layout for that use shows that there would be bedrooms on the ground floor and a shared kitchen and dining room. There would be a small staff office, and again, the remainder of the extension at the back would be bedrooms. On the upper floors for members, again, would be ensuite bedroom accommodation, although at the front here, the family suite would be turned into 2 individual bedrooms that would share a bathroom. So that is the approved layout as approved by the original planning permission. This application does not seek to review the original planning permission. It's purely focused on the original planning conditions. And as the chairman has advised, this application is put forward by the applicant to vary condition 4, which was to agree a management plan for the property, and to remove condition 6, which limited the use to a 3-year time frame. Just to draw members to their attention, in the update paper provided at the meeting, there is an alternative condition 5 that has been put forward by the applicant due to concerns that this would also, like condition 6, prejudice their ability to bring forward the accommodation and to obtain the necessary finance. And that obviously members may wish to consider as part of their debate. I would only comment that, again, the application is purely focused on the conditions. It's not reviewed the original permission, and that members have the options to either refuse the application if they consider that the permission should remain subject to the original conditions originally imposed. They may obviously decide to modify those conditions in accordance with the proposals put forward by the applicant or officers, or they may vary them as they see fit. However, in doing so, members need to be minded to have regard to the reasons for imposing the tests for imposing planning conditions that are set out in the NPPF, which are also referred to in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. We move to our speakers. If we can, Matthew White, Mr. White, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
The local residents of Castle Road that I represent today are sorry for the committee finding itself back debating and considering on the conditions that it had already taken time to debate and deliberate on. And we, the local residents, thank the committee for the protection that those conditions, especially the 3-year limit, afford us. This clearly demonstrates that the committee has the local residents' interests in mind, and on behalf of the local residents, I thank the committee. If the 3-year condition is removed, with it will be the protection that it affords local residents, and which has provided peace of mind, together with easing of mental health impact that the change of use being granted has on local residents. The 3-year condition provides Two Saints with the incentive to operate at the highest standard, and given the poor performance and behaviour of Two Saints in terms of their failure to provide adequate management data requested by local residents, as well as their failure to consult with local residents, the latter of which this committee made very clear in its criticism of Two Saints in the last meeting. And despite that, Two Saints have again failed to consult with local residents prior to making this application to remove the conditions that protect the local residents. Quite simply, the local residents of Castle Road that I represent today have no confidence in Two Saints, nor do we trust Two Saints. We, the local residents, turn to and rely on the committee to uphold the well-being of both local residents and the resident clients of Two Saints, and today urge its members to stand firm on the conditions and vote for what they have already agreed is right, proper and appropriate for all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thorne.
Thank you. Much has been made about the intended use for homeless people. The previous report and this one are very careful to refer to this as intended, not the use. The approved use is a HMO. The HMO could be occupied by all sorts of people, could be less on the general market, could be used to accommodate key workers, ex-offenders, executives, or even people like me, dog lovers, who all want to keep 2 dogs each. Each would have a detrimental effect on the adjoining occupiers and the neighbourhood. The only saving grace in the approval that was granted was condition 6, which restricted it to 3 years. The applicant seeks to remove condition 6. The only stated reason for this is financial. The report clearly states at 6:15 that this is not a consideration for this planning committee, so that should be an end to the matter. However, it goes on to suggest that their inability to obtain public funds for the development with condition 6 in place could be seen as self-defeating for the HMO approval. Their funding agreements are peculiar to them. Condition 6 is not self-defeating because the HMO could be implemented by anybody, the existing owner or anybody that purchases the property. If the officers do believe that condition 6 makes the approval self-defeating, the committee should have been informed of this before they approved the application, based on the belief that they could rely on condition 6 to protect the local residents and the neighbourhood. The report goes on to attempt to suggest that the management plan for the property could replace the need for condition 6. This is a management plan for an intended use by an applicant that doesn't have ownership of the property and has no financial means to acquire it. There's nothing in it to address issues relating to other potential occupiers. It would be premature to approve this or make any decision on a management plan until the actual occupants of the HMO are identified and can be confirmed. So, no material changes to the proposal since you made your decision, so why would you do anything to come to a different decision on condition 6? It's simply premature to agree the management plan at this stage, so that should be set aside until the occupants are known. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Mr. McDermott, the applicant. You have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks committee for letting us hear this application. It's, you know, it was our last thing in our mind was to bring this back. I must state that at the beginning, but it is here. And as I say, we're here to seek the removal of the current temporary condition not to approve HMO licence, and that's already done and dusted. We also would like to confirm what we've done to engage with the local community since June and provide assurance and on our expertise as a housing and homeless provider and how we manage and reduce risk. And reconfirm our commitment to support members and the council to reduce and prevent homelessness and all its associated impacts on Island. And again, to agree that the submitted management plan for the property, albeit is not a condition of the planning condition decision. So to confirm, you know, the 2019-24 homeless strategy as a vision for everyone in Ireland to have a place to call home, you know, that's been confirmed in the last meeting. It was confirmed by the council this week, and when I had another chat with them. And some council officers have said there's a housing crisis on the island, and homelessness in all its forms is predicted to get worse, made worse by an 82% loss of private rented accommodation, demonstrated in part by recent approaches to the officers and members by local residents who are facing losing their home as no fault of their own. So the service we will provide will be affordable housing option for island people and a place where they can build their lives and contribute positively to society. Our request to remove the temporary condition is critical to enable us to access Home England's grant subsidy to purchase the property and achieve social rents. As part of bringing this application to the committee through discussions with local residents, council staff, we have sought to reassure all parties of our commitment to providing safe, well-managed services. As a registered housing association, we are regulated by central government over key themes such as health and safety, property standards, tenancy management, letting protocols, antisocial behaviour, and as a commission service by this council, we will be fully monitored by this council in terms of how we deliver that support contract. As a leading housing provider on homelessness. We also bring more than 50 years experience to the island and the benefits of a well-trained and skilled organisation and staff team. We deliver 39 of these services, very similar to this across 13 local authorities, and to date we've never had a contract issue in any of those services or indeed had any contract removed. Since the last meeting we have met 3 times with residents to answer questions and listen to any concerns people may have. We've also offered the opportunity for one-to-one meetings, and we've also offered the opportunity to visit services on the mainland just to get a feel and a view in real life. In response to the feedback, we've amended the management plan. You will see that we've increased the night staff in the evening cover, which wasn't in the previous management plan, which gives that cover 7 days a week, evening and nights, which is quite a massive shift to the management plan. We're committed to installing fencing. As you can see, the property is very open. We're ensuring that we'll put proper fencing to manage any sort of privacy issues that may be around or any noise pollution at the back of the property, as well as confirming some CCTV and other security arrangements. The management plan has been devised to provide more information to all parties about how we will manage the property, support residents at Castle Lodge and work with stakeholders, including residents, to ensure the services is a success. We are committed to agreeing the management plan with relevant parties and will vary it as the service develops. However, we do need to state we cannot agree it to being part of condition of the planning decision. If the plan is not adhered to, the permission to use Castle Lodge as a HMO will cease. The risk of change of use ceasing brings us a number of barriers for purchasing this property. We cannot charge the property against any loan we take out, which makes funding for the purchase unsustainable. We will not be able to sell or assign the property as a HMO to another party, as they're unlikely to sign up to the specific wording of the management plan. In the event of a variation to the support contract by the council, services by the White, as a result of changes to client need, we may not be able to adhere to that plan either in terms of the staffing. We understand the council members and residents want assurances over management of the property, and as noted, we are more than happy to work to an agreed plan and vary over time with relevant parties. However, this reassurance is also already provided through our registration as a registered provider with central government, commission contract with Isle of Wight Council, on commitment to high quality, safe and secure service provision, sign up to the island's referral panel chaired by the council, and again interest in us to do anything negative that will impact on our reputation across the island and further afield. In summary, in the words of the council officers, the island is facing a very real housing crisis, which is only perceived to get worse as the supply of rented housing reduces and the effects of wider economic issues impact on local lives. As a registered not-for-profit charity, we want to bring investment through our purchase of Castle Lodge, £500,000, to operate a home for local people on social rent so they have an opportunity to rebuild their lives. We have listened to local concerns to improve the management plan and are bringing our extensive experience to support the island and community and council to reduce, prevent and the negative impact of homelessness. We are seeking the change of use for Castle Lodge to be made permanent. And in terms of the management plan, we are not moving away from the principle of agreeing a plan. We are very much committed to it. We just cannot have it as part of the conditional planning, funding reasons, and believe that members, the local committee and Isle of Wight Council can be reassured by our commitment to working in partnership and the risk mitigating mechanism noted above. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have the statement from Councillor Joe Lever, who's not well, so we send our regards for him to recover as quick as possible. Over to you, Ollie, to read it out.
Firstly, my apologies for not being at the committee in person due to illness. Members, we are here now because ultimately committee members recognise the validity in resident concerns regarding material considerations on the last application. Whilst not enough to refuse the application, that recognition did result in the 3-year review condition that you are now here, in part, to consider the removal of. So, there's a very simple question you need to ask yourselves today, which is, since the submission of this latest application, have the actions of the applicant and any new information they've put forward sufficiently resolved the concerns yourselves and residents had to warrant removing the review? If the answer is no, then you should refuse this application. It was widely viewed that the consultation on the original application was inadequate. Since then, Two Saints have sought to engage with residents via email, postal communication and a series of public forums. I'd initially like to offer credit to Two Saints for improving their consultation for this new application. However, it's still frustrating it took the potential loss of funding to achieve this. I've also had feedback from residents who I'm told did not receive postal communication and feelings that the public forums didn't achieve much more than creating greater friction, leaving many residents now less confident in the acceptable management of the HMO than they did previously. When I spoke on the original application, I expressed concern about Two Saints' apparent lack of data regarding performance and incidents. I believe this is vital to understand how well you're operating as an organisation and identify challenges and ways to improve. Residents have since asked for what I view as pretty reasonable data requests. The answers provided by Two Saints didn't really provide the data that was asked for, again leading to a waning sense of confidence in their operational capabilities. Two Saints have mentioned that they adopt a continual learning culture, which is great to hear. However, this appeared to be solely done by learning after incidents occurred rather than proactively looking at performance through data and KPIs. I'm happy to be corrected if it's not the case. There were also requests for information regarding other properties that Two Saints already manage. There was little information provided, with Two Saints explaining that they didn't want to give out the exact locations, citing relevance and confidentiality. However, I've since been informed that this information has been found on the Two Saints publicly accessible website. This left residents wondering whether Two Saints were deliberately being obstructive or unforthcoming. I also find it concerning that apparent confidential information is, as I'm told, publicly accessible via a website. Two Saints have previously alluded to managing comparable properties to the proposed Castle Lodge property. However, once the properties were identified, their comparability became very questionable in the eyes of residents and I. Arguably, the closest comparable property, as I understand it, houses a maximum of just 4 individuals, a far different scenario to a maximum of 12. As a consequence, residents are concerned that this is much more of an experimental case than what was initially described and now see even greater need for the 3-year review. The outcome of the original application, albeit not what the majority of residents I've spoken to wanted, was something they accepted as they saw the 3-year review as a safety net. Two Saints themselves accepted the condition at the time, a point that residents also feel brings their competency into question. To remove the 3-year review, when resident scepticism and concern is seemingly higher than ever before would, I feel, bring this committee into disrepute. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect applicants to understand their funding requirements, and a local planning authority shouldn't have to backtrack because an applicant wasn't prepared. So, members, I ask the question again. Since the submission of this latest application, have the actions of the applicant and any new information they put forward sufficiently resolved the concerns yourselves and residents had to warrant removing the review? In my view, and the views of many residents, the answer is unfortunately no. I've also been made aware today that the applicant is now looking to amend the already amended Condition 5 stated in the final officer report. I'm informed that Two Saints have explained the existing wording in the final report would again result in barriers to obtaining funding. Why was this so late to be identified? I would advise not accepting the latest amendment as it effectively removes a consequence for not fulfilling their obligation as a responsible service provider. We as a council cannot let partner organisations operate unchecked in this way. It sets a dangerous precedent. I'd just like to finish that, regardless of the outcome of this committee meeting, I hope there is a focused period of reflection and learning from Two Saints and the council regarding the Castle Lodge saga, so that we can all do better by residents.
Thank you. Does Stuart, do you wish to, is there any points raised you wish to come back on?
Yes, Chairman, if I could just respond perhaps to some of the points the residents made, particularly around condition 6, the wording of self-defeating in the report, and the management plan, really. I think councillors recall that the original report from officers back in June didn't recommend a temporary consent. It was obviously put forward after the debate, or as part of the debate, as a suggestion, which was followed through to being put on the permission. And I appreciate the reasons for doing so. the officers had originally considered the management plan condition, which would be enshrined within the planning condition and require its adherence, should be sufficient to ensure appropriate management of the property. Members will note, or councillors will note, that the Hampshire Constabulary have looked at that management plan, and they have commented that the hours of staffing support that's set out within it, they are confident would ensure an effective management of the property. In terms of the reference in the report to self-defeating, that is meant in the context of this application, whilst it is for a HMO, is very much put forward by the applicant to promote or to provide stage 2 homeless accommodation. So there's a very specific reason that this application is before the committee, and that is as part of the council's contract to provide that accommodation with the applicant. And you know, whilst this isn't a review of the permission, which has already been granted per se, you know, as the applicants themselves put forward and we put forward in our previous reports, there is a need to provide homeless accommodation on the Isle of Wight. And, you know, our policies do look at promoting the need for accommodation, particularly for vulnerable people, and affordable accommodation. And, you know, in terms of the applicant's point about the finance, whilst that may not be a material planning consideration, the context of self-defeating is that there was this particular point to providing that accommodation to support the delivery of homelessness accommodation, and therefore, in light of the issue being raised following the last committee, officers do appreciate that actually, from what we've been told, if condition 6 were to remain, then it's unlikely that the accommodation, homeless accommodation, will be provided here by the applicants.
Thank you. I would like to, I'll just make a quick comment, because I do feel, and I think all members here that were actually involved in that decision, we did actually ask very clearly about if a 3-year condition was put in, would that affect the financial proposal with that? And we were clearly told at that meeting by both the applicants, yourself, and the others, that that wasn't that was something that they could overcome. So I do feel.
I don't recall confirming.
I think it
financially it would work.
I think it came from the officer and yourself, clearly, because this was raised by members. So I do have some kind of empathy, and I think members do, of empathy with objectors within that consideration with that. Can I?
Yes, well, first of all, to echo my concern about process explained by Councillor Brodie. I did, in advance of the meeting, to ensure that we all had the right information, inquire about the 2 visits, and I was informed that notes have been taken of the questions and answers from both visits, and I'd asked that those questions and answers be shared with the committee before the committee this evening, so that we were all similarly informed. I noticed they weren't provided, and I just asked why that was not the case. I have a second question, but perhaps I'll pause at that moment.
I think all the things that were raised at the site visit have been fed back into officers that attended. So I'm happy for them to answer that question.
So yes, I can confirm that I took notes from the meeting on Friday. That was to enable any key issues that were being raised on the site visit to be considered at Chairman's briefing that reflected the meeting. I think a key point here would be to remind councillors, who I'm sure are aware already, that the key purpose of the site visit is to understand the site and undertake a visual survey from the site and to satisfy themselves of any issues that they may have. Any questions can be potentially made at that site visit or subsequent to officers prior to the meeting or through the debate when considering the item at the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The second one, I wonder if we could pull the plan of the residents up again, just to do a comparison. I can point it out easier if we can pop it up on the board. Can we go to page 2, please? Is it? I noticed on the document which is attached, which is in our pack, just to visually show it to people, it's this one at the back. I noticed on this one that the, there we go, that the boundary, which is on here, the red line showing the curtilage of the property 54, runs along the wall of 56. And I'd understood that it was actually running down the middle as the plan on the screen is showing, rather than along the boundary of 56. Just to confirm which is correct, does the boundary run along the wall of 56 or is it down through the middle of the path as on the display? Question was asked at the site visit, and I believe the question asked at the site visit was that it was a shared alleyway between the two properties. If that's the case, I just wondered if there was any other easements on 54 that we should be aware of.
Sarah is going to reply. Sarah will reply.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to kind of advise members for clarity that this application seeks consent to vary a condition. There is no requirement as part of a variation of condition to deal with the site area that was any different from the original consent. So I think that that matter is dealt with as part of the base application that members considered back in June. The matters for consideration at this meeting relate purely to those outlined within the conditions, and that is, and therefore the line effectively is somewhat moot. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, with respect, I don't entirely agree, because the information was provided to us during the introduction and provided to us in the written papers and for us. I simply want to know which is accurate.
Are you able to answer that question?
I'm just going to say that looking at the red line plan and obviously the photograph here, the red line would appear to go central through this alleyway here at this time in terms of what it looks like. But ultimately, as Sarah said, this application does not change the site area of the original permission. This is purely concerned with the conditions on which the original permission was granted.
I understand that. It was simply about the accuracy of the information before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. At the site visit on Friday, I asked about whether we could have some more information to help the discussion with regards to the provider's history and their track record, which I think is, while some people will probably argue it's not a planning consideration, but the way this facility is going to be run and who the applicant is and who the permission would be granted to makes it pretty relevant, I think. Now, we've been provided with this, which is, in my opinion, very, very little. It pretty much says that they're a new provider and they're yet to really have any kind of track record. I assume that means on the island, because this company has been in operation since 2001. I would have thought that unless I'm wrong, I would have thought that an applicant providing this kind of operation that knows that residents have concerns, knows that the planning committee had concerns, and is bringing it back before us, has not provided anything to prove that they've got a good track record at delivering this kind of facility. So my question is, why haven't we got that? And my second question is, does anyone now feel more comfortable than we did previously? Thank you.
Are you able to answer that?
Sorry, I'm going to come in on that one. Thank you, Chairman. I think the answer to why haven't we, I think I'm going to directly answer your question, Councillor Price, in why have we not been provided with that. I think what I would kind of remind members is that, councillors, apologies, that what we are looking at is a consent that runs with the land. There is nothing within this permission that is personal to the provider, which is something that one of the third parties raised during the kind of public debate. What we do is incorporate such things as the management plan, because that is what planning can control. So I cannot sit here and say to you that definitively that the applicant will be the person providing this facility, because ultimately that is not what planning is doing. What planning has done is approved the use of this property as an HMO, with a requirement for a management plan for how that HMO will operate. What this current application that members are considering does is do two things. One, try and agree that management plan and how that property will be managed and maintained, and also to provide to remove condition 6, which requires it to be only temporary. They're the two things that this application does. So ultimately, the provider, although it is relevant as a council, because as a council, we are in partnership with the provider and we have an agreement with the provider, should they purchase the property to provide this facility, the planning use of the site and the land use of the site would be for an HMO subject to the management plan that has been submitted. And that is why the information from the planning perspective is not considered relevant to the considerations of the planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Price.
I fully appreciate that from a planning officer's perspective, and it wasn't the job of the planning officer actually to provide that. I would have expected Two Saints to have come here with something tonight to convince us. Why haven't they come here to convince us? I'm not convinced at all. I want to be convinced. I'm sitting here now absolutely agonising over where we're going to take this decision. It was an agonising decision before. I came for a lot of criticism over it, but I felt that we needed to do the right thing. I wanted some convincing tonight, and we're only just starting the debate, but I'm not feeling convinced that we should be removing condition 6.
Can we just keep to questions and then you can come back on?
Well, my question was, and I'll leave it hanging, because I'm not going to get a response, and it's not the planning officer's job to respond to this. It was the job of Two Saints to come here armed with it, or make sure we had it before today, was some verification of their track record to put us at ease, and we haven't had that.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at the original planning application, so I've come into this actually possibly with a fresh pair of eyes. 12 people living in a house in the middle of a resident, already pretty heavily residential area. I suddenly having 12 people in the middle of it. Anyway, that's a point. Why did the applicant not go to appeal if he didn't like the condition? What else do they run, which I'm supporting Councillor Price's, comment about what sort of track record. How much work has this council done in checking up on this? If this was purely a procurement exercise, there would be 80 pages to be filled in. I know the council aren't actually procuring the service, but they are a partner to it. And therefore, I feel a fair section of procurement rules that this council has should be applied. I think that's all I have at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, so obviously just like to respond to why we, the applicant necessarily go to appeal. I mean, ultimately, it's the application, there's a mechanism within the Planning Act that allows the applicant to come back to the council to ask them to review the planning conditions ultimately, and one, that's a quicker process, and two, you know, that really should be the first port of call in terms of going back through the local process rather than necessarily appealing to the national level. So the current application obviously brings the application back before the committee to allow them to review the conditions on which they originally opposed.
Do you wish to answer further to that, Vanessa? Sorry, Councillor Churchman.
Not really. I mean, I still major on the procurement part, you know, what enough. I mean, if you think of the PFI contract, I know we're talking about millions and millions of pounds, but it took years to get that through. This in its own small way should have, to me, the same rules applied to it. And I think as a council, we're leaving ourselves wide open. So I'm afraid, Chairman, I can't support the removal of this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important to note, Councillor Churchman and Councillor Price, that obviously, on the one hand, what the officers are saying is correct. We have to look at this from a planning point of view, but we might have to, from this meeting, raise issues to another section of the council, which is in fact the housing part of, I think it's separate now from adult social care, who have actually commissioned this service within that. But it's something that we can't necessarily address at this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. In the letter which was read out by Councillor Lever, it was mentioned about option 5, and there's amendments already on the table for option 5. Can I clarify what option 5 was?
Can you answer that, sir?
Certainly. So this was the original condition 6 associated with the mother permission, which in the papers for the in front of you today is referred to as now condition 4 is now condition 5.
So it is relevant to the two we're looking at on the table at this moment. Okay. It's condition 4, not condition 5. That's
Can we just have a little bit more explanation about that? Because I think members need.
Let me try and make this clear. Right. So the application seeks consent to remove condition 4 and 6 from the original consent. In considering such an application, when putting the conditions back on, officers have the ability to add further conditions, should they see them to be necessary, to the matters that are being considered, and to then remove or vary the ones that are being considered. So what the report in front of you does is have condition 1, 2 and 3 exactly the same as before. Condition 4 and 5 Now, both do what condition 5 previously did. And so condition 5 was for the submission of a management plan. What condition 4 and 5 of the report in front of you suggests are two conditions that require the compliance with that management plan, as well as a CCTV condition as requested by the Crime Prevention Design Advisor. Condition 6 is proposed to be removed, but there does appear a condition 6 in the report due to the shunting and the additional condition. So it's just the ordering of them. But the conditions as presented in the report in front of members are the conditions as suggested by officers for your consideration this evening. The condition in the update paper, which is shown as track changed, is a proposed variation to condition 5 as put forward by the applicant, but the officers are not recommending that members support. But councillors, you do have the opportunity to consider that should you wish or consider that change to be acceptable. Hopefully that clarifies matters, but I'm happy to come back, and I think Ben wants to come in.
Mr. Guards is coming in from a legal point.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarity from me, which hopefully won't cloud the issue further for councillors around the room, and that's that what we're dealing with here is an application under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act. But in effect, what it is commonly referred to as an application to vary conditions. But were you minded to grant permission here, what the developer, the landowner, is left with is 2 planning permissions. It doesn't replace the first one, and that's why there's a need to carry over conditions to this permission, because each permission, both the Section 73 permission, should you grant it, and the original planning permission are standalone, and in theory, a landowner can implement either or. They don't have to implement the later one. So that's why you see replication of conditions on a Section 73 application when it's determined. It's because it's essential, because each in their own right is a separate planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, if you thank.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a really simple question. I'll save the comments till later. Is it acceptable for us to perhaps remove condition 6, but beef up condition 4 with extra conditions within that?
As I said at the end of our presentation, Councillor Brading, it's up to members, up to councillors to decide which conditions they wish to impose. So the only advice I would give you really is, firstly, to have regard to the 6 tests set out in the NPPF and the officer report in terms of imposing those conditions. And secondly, just ensuring that the conditions that you are recommending do not affect the nature of the original permission granted or impose any more onerous conditions than were originally granted. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman.
I believe I'm right here, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Is this a question?
Yes, that eventually this will go before contract procurement within the Isle of Wight Council to establish a contract with whoever is operating this premises afterwards. And if that is the case, then is it true that a material element of that procurement process would be this management plan? And further, I assume that that contract procurement process could add conditional elements in that procurement to this management plan.
I got an indication from the applicant that he can actually answer that question.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Just a couple of points. That we've been on the island for 3 years, so this is not new. We were delivering services at Butler Gardens. But just on that, we've been through.
This is highly irregular. The applicant has already had their opportunity to speak.
I understand.
And you are now bringing them to breaking procedures again.
I was only going to say the procurement process.
Can I stop you? Can I stop? Can I stop you?
I'm sorry, Chair, I thought it was quite a simple question.
Not so simple.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie.
Just want us to come back on that point.
Can I, one, I will ask the officers to come back on this point, but also put it that this is outside the remit of planning here tonight, okay, in that relevant to that question. But I will put to Mr. Bolter to confirm this. Sarah to confirm this.
I think we're going to do a joint approach. So I'm going to come back in terms of a direct answer to the question, and then Stuart will come in on specifics in relation to the management plan that is proposed to be linked to this application. In relation to the contract process, Two Saints currently have a contract with the Isle of Wight Council for homelessness provision. So the procurement process has already been undertaken prior to planning. The planning process simply determines which building Two Saints wish to undertake that function within. So yes, there will be contract requirements as part of that contract between housing and Two Saints. That is outside of the planning process, but yes, there will be. The planning process and the conditions cannot specifically control that, because obviously that contract is already in place and procurement's been undertaken. But Stuart will come in on some comments specifically in relation to the elements of that contract that are included within the management plan that supported this application. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, I just wanted to clarify in terms of the management plan, and councillors would have read through that before the meeting. But ultimately, the management plan, whilst it's correct that we would, the planning permission grants HMO use, the condition would tie the operation of that use to the management plan ultimately, and so it would require that use to be operated in accordance with it. Now, that management plan covers a number of items. Firstly, the applicant is stated to be responsible for the implementation. So whilst the actual provider of the accommodation may potentially change, there is a responsible party for ensuring that a management plan is implemented. Now, that management plan sets out things like how residents would be placed in the property. So that would include going through the council's homelessness pathway. Councillors will see from the management plan that there is a process by which people are identified as being suitable or not for going into certain types of accommodation. The council chair the panel that oversees that process, and the management plan signs up to only placing people in the property that go through that process. And ultimately, it also limits it to the stage 2 of the pathway. And those are generally people that are engaging with services, they're on the way to independent living, and that they are generally undertaking education and training to get back on their feet. So there are specifics within the management plan that do control the use, ultimately. There's other things in there to do with the security and measurements that they would put in as part of that as well, in order to address concerns around from the Hampshire Constabulary. But I think it's important that in terms of the commissioning side of it and the contract, there are elements that are integrated within the management plan that would, through the planning process and the planning condition, link that to the operation of the use that we've approved or that has been previously approved.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to come back with a follow-up on that. So can you confirm that in the considerations for the revision of the management plan that we're looking at this evening, there's nothing in there which is contradictory or supersedes the management elements of the procurement agreement which is already in place?
We can't necessarily confirm that because we haven't seen the procurement or commissioning contracts or anything. But ultimately, what I can say is that we've not received any concerns raised by the housing needs manager, ultimately, who oversees the commissioning side of things. And no concerns have been raised from the applicant in terms of any potential conflicts. Ultimately, they've submitted the management plan, and I would have thought that if there were conflicts with any other process that they're involved in, again, without wanting to use that term, it would be self-defeating for them to put a management plan in that they couldn't implement.
Sorry, just one final thing, if I may. So if we agree something this evening which is found to be later in contradiction to that procurement process, which takes precedence, the procurement agreement or this planning decisions of the planning meeting with a management plan this evening. I'm sorry to be picky on this, but it seems to be quite a key point.
If I can just clarify on that point, Chairman, thank you. They're both separate and distinct regimes, and so you're not, by this planning approval, seeking to amend any contract that the council has with Two Saints, or indeed the other way around. If you approve something that's beyond the scope of the contract that Two Saints have with the Isle of Wight Council, they'll be required to come back in to make an amendment to that, to their contract with the council in order to comply with it, because you're dealing at the moment simply with the regulatory regime of approving a planning permission, an application for planning. So that's all we're dealing with at this stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Churchman, is a question?
Confused.com. As I understand it, a contract was arranged before the building was acquired, except the building has not been acquired. And I'm trying to get the chicken and egg situation. First of all, I want to know how long the contract is between the Isle of Wight Council and any provider, if it's specific to this one. Secondly, why was the contract awarded when the property has not actually been sold? And is the contract just a way of somebody acquiring a property? Because as I understand it, with this condition in place, the vendor, not the vendor, the person purchasing the property has not got the funding to actually buy it. So you can understand my chicken and egg. And I find this a very peculiar situation.
Absolutely. Mr. Guard is going to
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back in on the point again, I reiterate that they're separate. These are separate processes. The fact that there is or is not a contract in place isn't relevant to the determination of the application before you here, which the contract that's in place is entirely separate. The contract, in theory, could be with anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the Isle of Wight Council. It could be with anybody, and your advisors, the staff here present, would be advising you the same thing. So I think. And we'd urge councillors around the room to step away from the contract provisions and deal simply with the planning merits of the matter that is before you. And that is either acceptable or it's not acceptable. And if it's not acceptable, why? From a planning remit and the consequences of your decision to the operator will have to be dealt with outside of this remit. This purely is looking at the acceptability or not of the proposed application from planning merits, not from a contract position. Thank you, Chairman.
With all due respect, I don't think life is as simple as that. Just look at the formation of this committee over the last fortnight and all the toing and throwing. It is not cut and dried. That is why I have raised the point about the chicken and egg. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ben.
into the debate of that. Do I have a Councillor Brodie?
Chair. I've got quite a bit to say here, so please bear with me. At the original application back in June, I was very much in favour of the application, and I was quite disappointed actually at the 3-year limit. I suspected we'd probably end up here, to be honest, and we never got any assurances that I heard that there wouldn't be a problem, but I was quite disappointed. I've spent most of my adult life either working in the housing area in my younger years, or also being concerned about how people at the sharp end of society are treated with regard to housing, which is why I'm always keen to see social housing, affordable housing, etc. And I'm always keen to see people who are unfortunate to be homeless in the 5th most affluent country in the world are helped to some extent. That was 3 months ago. back in June. Round about the same time, something similar opened in my ward, the ward of Pan and Barton, a facility called Howard House, which is a stage 1 homeless shelter. Castle Lodge is proposed to be a stage 2 homeless shelter. What the difference is isn't really clear to me. If you refer to page 23 of your report, it gives you a little description of stage 1 and 2. But in each of them, it refers to individuals with complex needs being assisted in either stage 1 or stage 2. This is a stage 2, Howard House, which is on the former site of Barton Primary School within Barton Village within Newport, is a stage 1 homeless and assessment shelter, and it opened 3 months ago. With my support, with not one single planning objection from any local resident. I did quite a lot of work on that with local residents, communications, door knockings, etc., etc. And I was quite chuffed, really, you know, that people would be tolerant of such a shelter opening within Barton Village. I think the leader of the council, she's gone now, actually congratulated the people of Pan and Barton on their attitude at the full council in July. But it was round about then that my volte-face tonight started. Because I remember having a discussion with Councillor Price about a previous planning committee where I said, all I need now is for Howard House to kick off. And by God, it did. It kicked off the next day. And I want to give you a little story of what it's like, because yes, we're making a planning decision, but we're also here, we've got to take into account the residents that we're here to represent. And I just want to give you a few tastes of what's happened in the last 2 months at Howard House. It established that it cost £750,000 to open, half of it funded by government. But since then, my residents, who are in a similar sort of road to Castle Road, near the town, Barton Road, runs up from Cotton's Bridge, 300 metres from the police station, interestingly. I'll come on to that in a minute. But what my residents have seen is an increasing levels of antisocial behaviour, drunken residents falling into gardens and vomiting, increased drug abuse in the area. And I appreciate some of the efforts that council staff have made to deal with that issue, but there has been no doubt, there's a drug problem in Newport anyway, but there's no doubt it's been increasing within my area. Noise and disturbance 24/7 in Barton Road, School Lane and Royal Exchange, which all meet at the former Barton primary site. There have been 2 particular incidents where a gentleman who was quite clearly disturbed with complex needs, who no doubt will move on to stage 2 one day, who essentially created an individual riot in Barton Road and Royal Exchange over a period of 4.5 hours, where people were scared to leave their homes. And yet the police, 300 metres away, down at the bottom of the high street, couldn't get there for 4.5 hours. Just think about that happening in the future. And then only the other week, another person in this shelter going up and down Royal Exchange and into the Pan Estate, whacking a great big long stick against people's windows and throwing their wheelie bins into the road, etc. And leaving children scared, waking them up. This was quite late in the evening, etc. And this is all happening at Howard House. This is run by the Salvation Army, who are also part of the procurement. The 2 saints are partnered with our housing service, with 24/7 staffing levels. Howard House is for 17 people. There are always 2 people there. But this is all still happening despite that. And I have to say to you that that particular organisation's response, in my view, hasn't been great. The Allied Council have done their best to support me, but their attitude is, I won't go into some of the things because it would take too much of your time. So 2 months or 3 months at home, but 2 months later, you know, I'm an extremely unhappy person. And I will say to you that, I have been a councillor. I'm in my 17th year now. This is the most problematic issue that I have faced in a very demanding ward in all of that time. All of that time. And, I can deal with things. I'm a tough guy. I know I'm tough here, but I can be tough out there as well. But this has given me more grief, more emails, more social media responses, more phone calls, more stopping in the street, etc. I've never known anything quite like it. So my view on Castle Lodge has entirely changed. And I now thank Councillor Price, even though I disagreed with him fundamentally 3 months ago, that at least he had the foresight to put 3-year protection in for the people of Castle Road, because my residents haven't got that. They haven't got that at all. Howard House is there. It's not going to get closed. All I've got to do is to make sure it's properly managed and that, the various agencies deal with the issues that happen within Barton. So I want to propose that we reject this application on the grounds that without this 3-year limitation, there is no guarantee that noise and disturbance will not be intolerable for the residents of Castle Road. At least with the 3 years, you've got some sort of protection, a safety net, for want of a better phrase, something my residents haven't got. And Joe Lever and Martin Oliver will always know that at the end of that 3 years, if things don't work, if it's as bad as I've experienced, then they know that it will close down. I haven't got that safety net. I urge members not to put those 2 members in that situation, and I formally move that refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second Councillor Brodie's proposal. Could I speak from now? This is absolutely perfect that we've had this 3 months for this to come back to us, in fact. And when I said earlier that I wanted to be sat here and I wanted to be convinced, I did want to be convinced. We've already been convinced that we needed to do this. We've already been convinced that we need to support homelessness. We've already agreed to a HMO in Castle Road. But what we couldn't do at the time was agree that it should go forward in line with the application and the officer's recommendations. So we had an alternative proposal which was voted on and accepted. And actually, the residents, I believe, have felt, from what we've heard, felt comfortable with that. I wanted to be convinced that I could come up with some other conditions tonight that would give comfort to the committee and the local residents and perhaps the planning officers. I will commend Stuart. I know he's worked hard on this. I know he's worked hard to try and work hard with the applicant to come back with something that would help us agree to removing that 3-year condition. I cannot vote for removing that 3-year condition. Just going back to Howard House as well. I didn't say this previously, but I obviously know Pan very well. I know the Barton site very well. I've been a governor there for nearly 9 years. That was before it moved to the new site. So I know that school site, previous school site, very, very well. And how that site differs from Castle Lodge is significant anyway. The grounds around it, the space between nearby properties is something we never even touched on last time. Now it's even more relevant because if it's not working there, what would make us think it's going to work there? Now, if the provider can make it work, wonderful. 3 years' time, we'll all be here, hopefully, still. We'll still be councillors then, and we'll probably be members of the planning committee. That can come back before us, and we can all, with confidence, put our hands up and vote for it to be a permanent fixture. So I would throw it back into the court of the applicant. I don't believe that this will fall completely, the funding. I don't believe it will. I I feel that there is some persuasion that could take place from the Isle of Wight Council to help with that. But I will not vote now, having heard what I've heard, and with the unconvincing unconvincing things I've had put to me, and the lack of additional information that I'd asked for from the track record of the applicant, I will happily vote for not removing condition 6. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to come in first in response to this?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can do. What I have is Councillor Brodie's motion for refusal on the basis that there is no guarantee noise and disturbance would not be intolerable in terms of the reason. In terms of working that into a potential reason for refusal for the application, I would suggest members may wish to, councillors, apologies, may wish to consider utilising the reason for which the condition was originally input. So the condition for the temporary consent on the original application stated to ensure the local planning authority, to enable the local planning authority to reassess the impact of the use hereby permitted on the amenity of the area and the amenities of neighbouring residents, and to ensure that it would not have a long-term harmful effect on the surrounding area and local community in accordance with the aims of policy DM2. What I'm hearing is that you're not satisfied that that has been achieved within the application in front of you. So members may wish to consider wording around, I haven't quite finished this, so around that, but effectively the council is not satisfied from the information submitted that the permanent consent of this use would not have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the area and the amenities of neighbouring residents, to ensure that there would not be a long-term harmful effect on the surrounding area and local community, and is therefore not in accordance with policy DM2.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie, you're happy with that? Councillor Price, are you? That. Councillor Jarman, just come in.
Yes, Chair, thank you. It is a very desperate need that we have on this island for housing, but I think what's been made very clear, and I think what we all feel very passionately about, as well as that housing crisis, that need, that desperate need, is the equal need for it to be well managed and maintained. Now, that is in the interests of everyone, the immediate residents included. And I think those, the reasons, having watched what happened at the last meeting where I also didn't take place, I can well understand why this 3-year, and I'll use the word probation here, because that's what effectively it is, this 3-year probationary period was put on here as a condition. And it is for the user of that site, the manager of that site, to prove themselves during those 3 years. And if they want at the end of that to come back with a suggestion, they can. But I think having that opt-out clause is absolutely critical here, because none of us can tell what will happen in that interim period, as is the case with every probation element. So I think it's essential that this clause remains.
Thank you. Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say this is a very difficult situation, because I do agree with Councillor Jarman. The Isle of Wight has got a desperate need for HMOs and to deal with our homeless situation. Speaking of someone who represents the Bay Area, we have got numerous, more than you can imagine, HMOs in the Bay. The vast majority of residents don't even know they're there, because they operate in such a well-organised way, and the people that go to these places do greatly benefit from help and support they receive in difficult circumstances. When this application was originally decided, I do agree that Castle Road is a good place for an HMO, and I was against condition 6 being implemented in the first place, because working with our homeless team at the council, I know that they review things more regularly than 3 years. They review things on an ongoing basis to make sure that the residents are getting the support they need, and also the area is protected as well. Like Councillor Price said, really, I was looking for reassurances tonight that we could remove condition 6, perhaps even put in a 24/7 care manager at the home, something to beef up condition 6. Because I think condition 4 rather, because holding condition 6 is restrictive, but I've not been convinced that we've got enough to remove condition 6 at this stage. So I would lean towards supporting Councillor Brodie's motion. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to come to the debate? Because if not, I will go to the vote. No.
Sorry, Chair.
Can you, sorry, Sarah, can you actually clarify the wording so that members are very clear what they're actually voting for and against? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So just to clarify, this would be a motion to reject the officer recommendation and refuse the application to vary condition 4 and remove condition 6. The reason would be the council is not satisfied from the information submitted that the permanent consent of this use would not have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the area and the amenities of neighbouring residents, and are therefore not satisfied that there would not be a long-term harmful effect on the surrounding area and local community, contrary to policy DM2.
Councillor Brodie?
That's absolutely fine by me.
Obviously, it's a named vote, so can we have those for the motion, i.e. for refusal?
Councillor Adams, Councillor Brading, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Critchison, Councillor Downer, Councillor Drew, Councillor Jarman, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Price and Councillor Lilly.
Those against?
None, Chairman.
Abstentions?
Councillor Beston.
The application has been refused. We'll go on to item 5, members' questions. I haven't received any questions. Councillor Price.
It's not necessarily a question, it's a bit of an observation. Considering the situation over site visits, I attended what I consider to be 70% of the site visit at Westacre Park, and I was not allowed to participate on the planning committee. Now, I had also attended a previous site visit to what is essentially Westacre Park, but I'm going to call it Westridge Farm, actually. And I attended a site visit then. Now, I would say that I am probably as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable, than anyone else on this committee of Westacre Park and its surrounding areas. But I was not permitted to join the debate, nor was I permitted to vote on that application. And so I do have a question, and that is based on the advice that we've had from the monitor and officer today, should I have been allowed to participate in that debate and then the subsequent vote on that application? If that is the case, where does that leave us when and if that application is challenged? Or, as an alternative, should that in fact come back before the committee so a broader element of members could participate in that application? I expect I won't get an answer to that tonight, but it's complicated and it's very much based on the advice we've had, which leaves the site visits. I will say before I complete what I'm saying, with regards to site visits, I've been on the planning committee for over 8 years, and there has been a number of occasions where planning committee members have had separate site visits. Actually, that wasn't me. I thought I'd had one separate site visit, but I hadn't. Not in probably in the last 4 years, but prior to that, we definitely had members that couldn't make the Friday morning, and I have a problem with making Friday mornings sometimes, but I do my best, and often make it there in my own vehicle, as people know. But there will be occasions where maybe experienced or knowledgeable members of the planning committee cannot make a site visit, and I actually feel that if the constitution is vague, maybe we need to think about whether we can have alternate site visits. I'd probably have a different view to Councillor Brodie on that one, because should we all be there together? Should we not all be there together? I don't know. My personal feeling is I don't think we necessarily need to be. We must have a site visit. I agree with that. Do we all need to do it together? I think it'd save the council money if we didn't. So my question really is, as I attended what I consider to be over 70% of the site visit at Westacre Park, I couldn't stay for the whole site visit because of it was my daughter's last day at primary school, and I wanted to go to a leaving assembly, which I wasn't allowed into, ironically. But not for any bad reason, by the way, just because only one parent each. But I tried my luck. But what I'm getting at really is, if I was there for over 70% of the site visit, and I know that site well, and I knew the exits and entrances and layout, existing uses, potential uses, I understood every element of that application, and I think I had valid input to offer to it. Should I, based on the monitoring officer's advice that we've had, should I have been able to participate? So, but I'll be happy with a written answer on that.
I'm going to not in a position to give that. I will take it up, which I am taking up this issue because it is very relevant, and I also accept the issues as raised by Councillor Brodie with the monitoring officer and the chief executive of the council in regard, and we're able to report back to you of that. Councillor Brodie.
Chair, and I absolutely agree with Councillor Price. What happened with the Constitution is applied and replied to group visits. That's quite clear. But as a result of the monitoring officer's intervention today, can I ask, does this entirely compromise the council's position with regard to any judicial review that may be exerted against the council and that decision in the future? The difficulty I have as the person who chaired the Westacre Park one is that I applied to the Constitution. That has been recognised by officers so far, but I now have a monitoring officer who's cut my legs from underneath me, and I will never forgive that. Can I have an answer to that, please?
Similar to Councillor Price, totally acknowledge it, and obviously we've got a record or have a record of that question. And yes, there needs to be a full explanation and strategy forward to actually correct this further confusion that has been actually created. So I acknowledge it, and I will take both of those questions back to get you proper written answers for the whole committee within that.
Chair, of course, there's also the other elephant in the room is the advice that you've received in the past from this monitoring officer regarding your participation in anything to do with Westridge Farm. And on the basis of the advice that's been given in the past, you shouldn't pursue those questions. It should be me as the vice chairman. But I am already entirely unhappy with the advice I'm getting that I've had over the last few months in relation to this committee. We have seen over the last 4 months this committee go from what was frankly, under Councillor Quirk, who's over there, a pretty serene committee who just dealt with planning. And now we spend as much time discussing minutes as we do on planning applications. It's farcical. It really is. And I know personally where the blame lies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It is noted, and I think we need to move on. Lastly, Councillor Jarman, and then come back to you, Councillor Price.
I don't want to draw too much on one topic, but I think what Councillor Price has raised is quite a critical point. And I think when we get the answer, we should ensure that the answer is not only in relation to one individual planning application which was mentioned, but is consistent upon all of the planning work and decisions that the committee makes and indeed has made in the past. Because if the decision ultimately, whether it is a change of the Constitution, whether it is a reinterpreting of the Constitution, or whether it is contrary to the Constitution from an individual, there is the potential for that ruling to be applied retrospectively to other decisions that the Council has made, not just to the one in question. So the decision needs to be very precise and very carefully considered so that we don't reopen the book on many historic things that the committee has dealt with. And I would urge that comprehensive approach to be taken in the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. There's noted, Councillor Jarman. Councillor Price and Councillor Brady.
Yeah, I just want to add to this because what Councillor Jarman's just said actually adds to what Councillor Brody said, which is that, and I'll be careful what I say because I don't want to point the finger in any direction, but anything involving legal advice to the planning committee previously has been handled at the planning committee by Ben or Justin, and it's always been handled professionally, clearly, and we've got the message and we've understood it. And I think that when we're taking legal advice, we seem to be taking a lot of legal advice ahead of planning committee meetings these days, which previously we didn't. We came to the planning committee and anything that we needed to ask or any legal guidance we needed was provided on the night. And I find it really hard to continue with the vagueness of advice that we're getting, and for that officer not to be here to answer to it. To be quite honest, I think that officer should have been here to answer to that tonight. And I think in future, I don't really go to monitor an officer for anything. I leave it till I'm in a meeting. I ask the legal advisor that we've got here, and I always get good, quality, straightforward answers, and the whole committee in front of the legal advice that they get know where they stand. And in future, that's the way I would handle it, and I'd urge other members to do it the same way, to be honest.
Okay, Councillor Brady. And
I have a very simple question. I think the strength of a planning committee is training and working together as a committee going forward over a 4-year period. Site visits are important, absolutely important, and they're vital in the Constitution that they have them. Councillor Price said Friday mornings for him are a challenge. Is it possible, I know it would involve constitutional change, is it possible that 2 dates are offered for site visits before the meeting? So as well as the Friday week before, could we have another day that week where the meeting, so everyone has to attend 1 or 2 visits? That way, everyone will have the opportunity to attend if the Friday mornings are a challenge. Is that possible?
Can Mr. Bolter has a response to your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Brading, the review of the Constitution and the Code of Practice relating to planning matters has effectively been instigated over the week, and I think that will be an issue that has been noted, certainly by the staff here today, and that will be taken forward and fed into that review. We'll certainly have a look and understand what is feasible and what isn't.
Just a small point. I must speak with regards to some legal advice I had early on regarding Westacre Park. And I had a letter from Justin Thorne. And I must say, at first, I was very angry with it. I was threatened by the developers. And on reflection, looking back on that legal advice, it was good. I was happy with it. It's, I think we can all do things in anger, but something that annoys me with this whole process, and I feel it needs to be said, is we are under constant threat from developers. And I think we need to try to change this view. There is something not quite right with the system. I'm not going to say anyone's corrupt. I don't believe anyone's corrupt. I certainly don't like to believe anyone's corrupt. But I think we fundamentally need to strive to try and change the system, because the way the developer is favoured, it gives a real bad public perception. And that's it.
I think that all the reviews that put forward on roads, and as Walter said, is that there is a review. We're looking at that. There is going to be training, someone mentioned the word training, on the 11th of October. Training, thank you, on the 11th of October. And I think that's been finalised, and that will give an actual opportunity to, it's an interactive training that will actually have a committee, and it will enable with peer support, i.e. skilled councillors or former councillors that have actually worked on planning in other parts of the country, to be able to go through some of the kinds of issues within that. And I think that we definitely want to move forward to tackle these issues and make that change. So I'm going to call, sorry, no, can we, no, sorry.
I'm just asking a question. Is members' question time for any member of the council, or just for the planning committee? Only it doesn't say so on the agenda, Chairman, so it's not clear. It says members' question. It's okay, it's fine.
Can we, I will now end the meeting at 6:05. Thank you.